heartbeat of the home. Why can't I remember? He thought. His mind would only reveal flashes of the afternoon's events. His head was on fire, sweat dripping down his face, like an addict on autopilot. Grant Liscombe burst through the front door, avoiding his mother in the kitchen. Like a spider returning to its web, his lanky teenage legs scurried up the wooden stairs of the old farmhouse to his bedroom. His arms flailed with uncontrollable fear as he yanked the dirt-covered shirt over his head, discarded it on the floor, then bounded to the bathroom, slamming the door. "What have I done? What have I done?" he muttered, lathering the perfumed soap through his fingers, frantic to wash the guilt from his newly calloused hands, watching the streaks of dirt dance and swirl down the rusty drain. His mind was confused by broken images of helping to clean the gutters, the ladder falling. Or was it pushed? The thud as Nick's body hit the ground, and the gleam of the metal shovel as Grant dug the body-sized hole. He confronted the reflection in the mirror, the gaunt, bloodshot, black-haired punk he had become. "Oh God, what have you done?" The reflection glared back with an evil grin. It began about a month ago, after his factory worker stepfather, Nick, lost his job. Grant's middle-aged mother, Jane, with little work experience, was initially grateful for the offer to stay at her aunt's derelict house, remotely located in the Haliburton Highlands of Ontario. Soon, she would regret it. They arrived late on an October evening, rain pelting down. The overwhelming stench of mold and decay nauseated Grant as he stepped onto the porch, past two white rattan chairs resembling broken skeleton bones. Like two cracked teeth, the front window panes whistled as Nick opened the door, and a rush of twisted oak leaves fluttered into the foyer, landing at the base of an antique grandfather clock. "Wow! Look at that beauty!" Grant exclaimed, smitten with the intricate carvings of the mahogany cabinet, the shiny gold filigree face, moon dial, and hands, all in pristine condition, a sharp contrast to the rest of the house. "Hey, Mom, didn't Grandpa have a clock like this?" He set down his backpack, rubbed his hands over the smooth, flawless finish, inhaling the rich smell of lacquer and lemon polish, opened the case to wind the weights, then set the hands to the correct time. "Yes, he did," she answered, removing her coat and shaking the rain from her short blonde hair. "But not as old as this one. Remember what Grandpa always said? The tick of a clock is the heartbeat of the home," they repeated in unison, their heartfelt laughter filling the room with his memory. "But seriously, Grant," she said, pointing at the clock. "That thing gives me the creeps." Grant shrugged. Then, as he tapped the pendulum to start the clock, he felt a sudden chill in the air, a quiver in the continuum of space and time. The walls around him seemed to expand and contract, like the lungs of the house had taken a deep breath. "Are you all right, Grant?" His mother's face concerned. "You look pale." "He's fine," said Nick. "Quit coddling him, Jane. He isn't a child anymore." He chuckled and gently kissed her forehead. "I'll finish bringing in the rest of the stuff." Grant sensed something was terribly wrong. Something had taken control of his body. His mind shouted with fear as his consciousness slipped deeper into an abyss, and a different, cunning voice answered. "I'm okay, Mom." After the family had settled in for the night, the clock softly chimed the midnight hour, and its demon contemplated setting its evil plans in motion. Returning to his room, Grant changed into clean clothes and put on some loud, heavy metal music. He suspected his mother was having issues with his new identity. He began rifling through his closet, not sure what he was looking for. Then, at last, he found it: the metal slugger baseball bat. As he held the handle, he confirmed that Mother was next. "Grant," his mother called from the kitchen, aroma of roast beef wafting up the stairs. "Are you guys done outside? Dinner's almost ready." The stairs creaked with warning as he descended each step. Slow and deliberate, bat at the ready. A satanic song blared out of his room, the heavy bass pounding the walls. Thump, thump, thump. "Turn it down," she shouted, stirring the gravy pot, steam filling the room from the whistling kettle. But his music grew louder. He continued his mission, unhindered. From deep inside, Grant could feel the raw hatred of the demon inhabiting his body, its cruel intention, but was powerless to intervene. Suddenly, like a beacon of light through the darkness, he heard a familiar voice. "Remember the heartbeat of the home." It was Grandpa. "Grant," the voice said, "kill the heartbeat." Jane Liscombe turned off the stove and stormed out of the kitchen, down the hall, stopping at the grandfather clock at the base of the stairwell. "I said, turn it." Stopping mid-sentence, she screamed and jumped back, just as the bat came crashing down, barely missing its target. Grant gripped tighter, then swung again, this time hitting a home run as the bat smashed the glass of the grandfather clock, dislodging the pendulum and sending it flying across the room. The chimes clanged noisily in pain as he swung again and again until the battered clock showed no signs of life. Grant's grandfather's undying love had helped him overcome the demon within him and return to H.'s former self. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, reaching out to hold her, just as Nick came limping through the front door, rubbing his head. "Nick, you're alive!" Grant shouted in surprise and relief, running to hug him. "Nick, are you all right?" "What happened?" Jane asked, still badly shaken. "I thought he was holding the ladder," he said angrily. "Must have fallen and knocked myself out." He looked around in disbelief at the shards of glass and pieces of wood scattered on the floor. "What the hell happened here? I'll explain in the car. We've got to leave. Now," Grant exclaimed as he helped Nick and his mother out of the house. They drove to the nearest motel, never to return. 2 years later, a young couple turned the key in the tarnished brass lock of their newly rented farmhouse in the Halliburton Hills, and as the war sunlight shone into the foyer, a spectacular sight was revealed. A beautiful mahogany grandfather clock, the chase on the rails, a pre-World War I. Calm masked the coming global upheaval. Amidst this backdrop, a train chugged steadily through the English countryside, its destination, Dover. Aboard the 1914 vessel, a passenger captivated many. The air was thick with a mix of excitement and unease as the train thundered down the tracks, its rhythmic chugging creating a comforting backdrop to the day's unfolding drama. Outside, the view was a mosaic of vibrant green meadows and charming hamlets, smelling fresh earth wafting through the windows, contrasting with arguing the imminent war. Inside the train carriage, the passenger in question sat quietly, their demeanor calm, yet enigmatic. Dressed in a sharp suit and hat, they exuded an air of mystery that drew curious glances from their fellow travelers. The train's rhythmic motion seemed to lull the other passengers into a sense of security, but an aura of intrigue surrounded this particular individual. The landscape outside the window shifted from a bustling cityscape to serene countryside. The enigmatic passenger remained a captivating enigma. Who was this mysterious figure, and what secrets did they carry with them on this fateful journey to Dover? The answers lay shrouded in the depths of their enigmatic presence, waiting to be unraveled by the curious minds on board. As the train neared its destination, the tension on board seemed to heighten, mirroring the growing unease gripping the world at large. Little did the passengers know the events set in motion by this mysterious traveler would soon intersect with the tumult of war, forever altering the course of history. Among the passengers was Mata Hari, the enigmatic Dutch dancer and courtesan who had captivated and charmed the elite of Europe. But her allure had drawn suspicion, and the British intelligence service had dispatched one of their finest, a seasoned spy named Jonathan Hawke, to shadow her every move. As the train pulled away from Victoria Station, Jonathan positioned himself discreetly in the adjoining compartment. His eyes never left the door to Mata Hari's cabin. Dressed in an inconspicuous dark suit, he blended seamlessly with the other travelers, his demeanor calm, but his senses alert. The rhythmic clattering of the train wheels provided a steady soundtrack to the journey, Jonathan's thoughts were as relentless as the locomotive's progress. He knew Mata Hari was dangerous. Her charm and beauty merely veils for her cunning and guile. The British had reason to believe she was ferrying secrets to the enemy, and Jonathan's mission was simple: follow her, gather evidence, and ensure she did not slip through their fingers. In her compartment, Mata Hari appeared unperturbed, gazing out at the passing landscapes with an air of nonchalance. Her elegant attire, a blend of exoticism and European sophistication, further enhanced her mystique. Her eyes, however, betrayed a sharpness, a readiness for the unexpected. As the train approached the coastal town of Dover, Jonathan's instincts heightened. He knew that if Mata Hari were to escape, it would be through the port, where she could easily vanish across the channel to France. He reviewed his plan, every move calculated to counter any strategy she might employ. The train's whistle announced their arrival at Dover. Passengers gathered their belongings, anticipation mingling with the salty sea air. Jonathan observed Mata Hari, who seemed in no rush. Her leisurely demeanor was unnerving, but Jonathan knew better than to underestimate her. At the station, the hustle and bustle provided ample cover for both pursuers and pursued. Jonathan kept a safe distance, blending with the crowd. Mata Hari moved with purpose, her steps leading her inevitably towards the ferry docks. As the crowd surged forward, Jonathan deftly maneuvered through the throng, maintaining his vigil on Mata Hari. His heart pounded, the adrenaline of the chase sharpening his senses. He saw her exchange a quick glance with a man in a gray overcoat, a signal too subtle for most eyes, but not for Jonathan's trained observation. Mata Hari quickened her pace, gliding through the bustling station with the grace of a dancer. Jonathan matched her stride for stride, his focus unwavering. He noticed the man in the gray overcoat shadowing her, and it became clear Jonathan was not the only one on her trail. The docks were a maze of activity, with ferries preparing for departure and travelers hurrying to embark. Mata Hari headed towards a smaller vessel, its destination marked as Calais. Jonathan felt the tension coil within him. He had to act swiftly to prevent her escape. Just as Mata Hari reached the gangway, Jonathan closed the gap, his hand inching towards his concealed firearm. But before he could make his move, the man in the gray overcoat stepped forward, blocking Jonathan's path. Their eyes locked, a silent recognition passing between the two agents of their deadly game. In a flash, the man drew a weapon, and something forced Jonathan to dive for cover. The crack of gunfire split the air, sending panic through the crowd. With the sight of her bodyguard lying dead with a bullet in the middle of his forehead, Mata Hari, seizing the moment of chaos, darted up the gangway and onto the ferry. Jonathan scrambled to his feet, his gaze fixed on the retreating figure of the dancer, now almost obscured by the fleeing passengers. Desperate, Jonathan sprinted towards the ferry, but it was too late. The vessel pulled away from the dock, the gap between the ship and the quay widening with every second. He watched as Matahari stood at the railing, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips. The sound of the ship's horn echoed through the harbor, signaling its departure. Jonathan's heart sank as he realized he had missed his chance to reach Matahari. The image of her standing there, so close yet out of reach, haunted him as the ferry disappeared into the horizon. Despair washed over him as he stood alone on the empty dock, the cold wind cutting through his coat and sending shivers down his spine. The sound of seagulls echoed in the distance, a stark reminder of the solitude that enveloped him. His heart ached with the weight of uncertainty, wondering if this missed connection would be his biggest regret. The memories of their last meeting played like a broken record in his mind, each moment tinged with longing and a sense of unfinished business as he gazed out at the vast expanse of water. He couldn't shake the feeling that something important had slipped through his fingers, leaving him adrift in a sea of what-ifs and maybes. The setting sun cast a golden hue over the horizon, painting a bittersweet picture of what could have been. The death of the artist. People file, though, galleries like they're waiting in the queue at the pharmacy. "Ooh," I hear someone say. "I like that one," pointing at a depiction of the artist being ripped to shreds in the war-torn jungles of Vietnam, like it's a new type of corn plaster she's thinking of taking for a spin. Most people move at a bureaucratic pace, past each frame. Tick, tick, tick. It makes sense if you want to see as much as you can. As the factoid goes, if you looked at each painting in the Louvre for just 30 seconds, it would take over 8 days to see them all. Nobody has that much time. I sit at the other end of the spectrum. I want to find artwork I'm entranced by. And when I do, I offer myself up for captivity. "Captivate me," I say, as I look at it loudly close up and quietly from a distance. I look at it in and out of focus. I close my eyes to try and recreate it in my mind. Then I look again. I look at the little corners that the artist probably thought nobody would focus on, or at that figure in the background, doing an impression of being incidental. I sit at bench 40Q in the Turner Contemporary, Margate. The painting I'm looking at has been in the gallery's permanent collection for 1183 days, and I've been here for most of them. Not in this spot the whole time. I'm not a lunatic. I do know the security guards by name, though, and they me. Trev, Stu, and Gaz have all added me on Instagram. Gaz has a great side hustle in bespoke, oversized macrame pieces. The gallery is on my way to and from work, and my twice daily visits to this painting have been a helpful pause, an inhale, exhale, as I take my own bureaucratic steps. So I feel like I've put in enough hours to generalize a little bit about gallery goers. The painting I sit in front of is called The Success of Icarus. It's a trans avant-garde painting. That is to say, it's bold and expressive. It tells its story with drama. Icarus doesn't fall. He rises. His arms stretch out to the sun. He is enveloped in white light, and his feathers begin to fall away. But his face is ecstatic. I've always thought he looks like someone at the top of a roller coaster, eyes wide with exhilaration, anticipation, and fear. The sea lies below him, painted in pale, insignificant colors, the waves soft and cushioning. It's 36 by 48 inches, oil on canvas, and an absolute smash hit. I'm not quite telling the truth. It's not trans avant-garde. It's actually a response to the trans avant-garde movement. But now, we're really counting brush strokes. It doesn't matter. The only place it ever mattered was during my PhD. One gallery goer reads the accompanying text for longer than he looks at the painting. I know it off by heart. The Success of Icarus, Hilary Vale, 1981. Oil on canvas. Vale reimagines the myth of Icarus, portraying him not as a tragic figure, but as a symbol of elation and freedom. With vibrant colors and dynamic energy, this celebratory painting challenges our shared narratives, focusing on flight rather than fall. The artist requested multiple revisions of this piece, leading to legal action by the gallery before the final version was completed in 1988. I check my phone. 8:46, already 1 minute late. I stand up to go. "Cheerio, Nate," says Trev. "Bye," I say, and stop. I step closer to Icarus, narrowing my eyes. Is that... I lean in. Maybe it's because I've been thinking about all the changes Vale made. But I swear, there's something different about it. Next to Icarus's mouth, where the feathers are beginning to scatter amongst the confusion of barbs, there's an unfamiliar shape. It looks a little bit like a teacup. I immediately dive down into the reservoir of Vale knowledge within me, but come up disappointed. I thought I knew every brushstroke, but Vale can still surprise me. I keep thinking about the teacup all the way to work, thinking loudly up close and quietly from a distance. It puzzles me. When I left my PhD, I had 2 criteria in my job search. It should offer me enough spare change for the 1 kilo tubs of kimchi, and it should be at least 99% conflict-free. I appreciate that there will always be some disagreements about the correct biscuit to have in the office, which I allowed 1%. I became a finance administrator at the Arts Center. Processing invoices, I thought, would be safe territory. Unfortunately, the artists who work for us don't care about submitting neat and accurate expense claims. And the people who owe us money don't really want to pay up. It's been 3 years. I still haven't really had the heart to make them, so now I'm failing art itself. I'm on my lunch break when I see it. There, on the top shelf of the cupboard, with the plastic champagne flutes, pumpkin carving kit, and a mug shaped like Dolly's head, is the teacup. My hand shakes as I gently lift it down, cupping it in my palms like a baby chick. It is very delicate looking, with a slightly worn gold rim. The only remarkable thing about it is a distinct blue tinge inside. Again, I search for some sense of recognition, but find nothing. I wrap it in my jumper, then in my bag, out of the way. All afternoon, I'm tempted to Google Hillary Vale blue teacup, but don't. Partly because I want the satisfaction of decrypting the enigma, and partly because I'm worried I'll stray into territory NSFW. When did I discover Vale? I was 14, an age where I loved things absolutely, before caution and caveats got in the way. We were studying a painting by Theodore Redgrave, a friend and artistic contemporary of Vale. Burned bright, died young by suicide. Small oeuvre, huge potential, all lost. My teacher couldn't miss me having a screechingly obvious, pivotal moment in his second period Tuesday art class. If you like this, check out Hillary Vale. There's a lot more to get into, he said, in the same voice he'd use to suggest that I might want to put the lids back on the pens. I did a quick search for Vale's work when I got home. I stayed up all night looking at it. I loved it. Loved the look of it. Loved his insistence on choosing the vibrant. Already at 14, the world's narratives felt familiarly miserable. Vale said, "Fuck that." Vale made me feel more me. I loved The Last Laugh, in which rainbow confetti erupts from the mouths of diners, laughing in the face of death. I loved Gutterfolk, a mid-'80s depiction of nurses providing hands-on care to an AIDS patient. I loved The Divine Mess, a vivid celebration of celestial chaos. I loved Hercules in Lace, in which the hero, draped in soft pink material, holds a club in one arm and cradles a baby in the other. I loved Sebastian, in which the saint looks too bored with his suffering to feel it. And of course, I loved the success of Icarus. That night, my heart pumping neon red blood through my body, I'd looked up Vale himself. Still alive. Not just that, contactable. I wrote him an email to say, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." When I arrive home from work, I put the teacup on the top shelf of my own cupboard. It is hardly in danger from my part cat, part cushion icky. But it feels right to try and keep it safe. All right, Gaz. Afternoon, Nate. Been at the macrame again, then? I wave my phone. Can't not do it. He winks and chuckles, not finding that joke any less funny than the first time he told it. I am just about to tell Gaz I've been meaning to put in a good word for him in the cafe exhibition space at the art center, when I look at Icarus and see it has changed again. Do you see that? I point next to where the teacup was. What? It looks like a bottle, a tiny bottle, pouring. See it? Gaz wrinkles his nose. Nah, can't see it, Nate. You must have looked at this guy one too many times. He makes the sign for crazy. But then again, he says, what do I know? I'm not the art doctor, eh? He slaps me on the back. I pause, my gaze suddenly completely stuck. Well, neither am I. Am I? Close enough, mate. I shake myself out of it. Make myself look him in the eye. Smile. I must remember to speak to Maggie about the cafe space. On the walk home, Gaz's comments pull me back to that moment, that room, 3 or so years ago. There's a certain shade of disdain which I've only seen from professors. Somewhere along the road to seniority, they all master it. Maybe they teach it at the graduation ceremony. Wouldn't know. Professor Sophie Simons, preeminent trans avant-garde expert with a specialism in Hilary Vale, had printed off my thesis so far. She had not sent me the notes ahead of my supervision. I'd been waiting 2 months since our last meeting. This copy had creased pages, coffee and wine, stains, and as she passed it over, she said, "Sorry, it appears some pages are out of order." I flicked through the first few pages, which had been scrawled on in various hands. What's going on? We sat opposite each other in her poky, umbrous office. It was a room in which I felt a Vale expert should have refused to teach. She perched on the edge of her chair, hands clasped. I felt, last supervision, that our conversation was unproductive. Her expression was concerned. Yes, we argued. A spirited discussion about the Redgrave matter. Any more than that, and I would have referred the matter to the faculty. She raised an eyebrow. Please bear that in mind, she continued. In our world, debate is par for the course. Pardon the pun, if you will. We must all stand up to critical vigor. But there is a point at which that becomes inappropriate. Please, I can't take another attack. You must hear me, Nathaniel, when I tell you that you have reached and passed that limit. Her voice became sharp. I can't tell you how many times I have attempted to dissuade you from your theory that Icarus was painted by a dead man. I think he's a collaborator, obviously not after he died, I said, already exasperated. Please refrain from interrupting me. I don't wish to argue with you. Her tone softened. I do ask that you hear me. Otherwise, we won't have time for you to complete your studies. We'll have to consider deferral, or worse. She smoothed down her skirt and clasped her hands again. I really do want you to consider this, as I'm sure you could be a stellar presence in the trans-avant-garde academic community. I've taken the time to ask my most eminent colleagues to read your draft. You will find some intellectual truths here from those who should matter if you want to pursue a future as a Vale scholar. Icarus is not a lost Redgrave. It is a tribute to him. This is a crossroads. There's still time to take another path. I've contacted Vale. I know he'll get back to me soon. The artist is not the canonical interpreter of their work. You know this. It doesn't matter either way. It's futile. She held her head in her hands and addressed him as though he were a 5-year-old who'd used her acrylics to paint the radiator. The work speaks for itself, Nathaniel. I knew as I walked out that it would be the last time we'd speak, at least as professor and student. Even if I picked some other central argument, with this thesis trick, she'd done a bang-up job of preemptively raising my reputation. I'd expected the worst, but even this didn't prepare me for the ambush when I read the notes. Inchoate notion of Vale's context. Gutterfolk is 1987, not 1986. Fundamental misapprehension of Vale and Redgrave's styles. Absolutely, Stephen. Couldn't agree more. You must abandon this notion. And one which simply said, "Ha, I'm so deep in memory, I nearly miss the small bottle. It's peeking out from a pile of discarded food packets by my bins. It's made of thick blue glass with a floral pattern. I have a battle with the cork stopper, but eventually I'm victorious. The inside smells of bitter almonds. I quickly replace it. I know very well what Redgrave drank to kill himself. What I don't know is why it's in my possession. I walk home quickly and put it on the shelf next to the teacup. Vale wouldn't have spent time on grim thoughts. So after Professor Simons and I uncoupled, I tried my best not to ruminate. I hadn't won over the establishment, and the artist had not validated my theory, but no one died. Just my ambitions and the plan for the rest of my life. As I look at Icarus this evening, I get as close up as I'm allowed. I trace my finger in the air over the brush strokes of the impossibly textured sea, a palimpsest. I look at the eyes, which bear a hint more definition than Vale's usual style. They look wider, more fear than exhilaration in them today. As I scan the sky, I see them all. The teacup, the bottle, and holding the bottle, a hand, not Icarus's. I think about my solitary park walk home and bite my nails. "Oh, right, Nate," I hear Security Stu call. "Heard you got Gaz his first exhibition." Maggie had loved the idea of macrame. Apparently, cord is in. He shakes my hand vigorously. "Good lad. About time Gaz got some recognition for his strings." "No problem," I say. "Evening, Stu." I glance at Icarus one last time before leaving. I can't help but see the hand The little finger sticks out. Jaunty. Camp. I wonder if I'll make it home. I'm really glad I put the bottle of cyanide where Icky can't get it. I'm close to the park when my phone begins to ring. It says unknown number, but I know who's calling. I answer. Hillary Vale? That's right. Hearing such a familiar voice addressing me feels like seeing the eyes of Icarus turn, slowly seeking to fix directly on mine. You emailed me a long time ago. Sorry it's taken me so long to reply. You really don't have to, I say. He laughs, and even though now I know what I know, I still feel a rush, an aurora surge within me. I sent you some emails more recently. I could have done with a reply to them, too. I pause. Regrave painted Icarus, didn't he? It takes a while for Vale to reply. He was more of a collaborator. But yes, we made it together. I'm back in the office. I'm telling Professor Simons. I imagine her face, those clasped hands, gripping on to the last moments of her illustrious reputation. I've still got the thesis covered in vicious marginalia. I could publish it. Watch as they all turn on each other. Until I realize they won't believe you, he says. I imagine myself actually trying to explain the situation and realize that I have no evidence. I am only Mr. Nate Crow, an embittered conspiracy theorist, trying to tarnish the memory of a living legend. Why do you think I've revealed this to you? Keep the trinkets. The police won't want them. I can hear him smiling. You murdered your friend, I say. Why? To live, Nate, he says. I had no choice. Think of my life with him still around. He was always the better artist. It was a fine margin. But there it was. Every award, every exhibition opportunity. He was there around every corner, winning it all. I always thought I could achieve more, do better, outrun him like Atalanta, until he painted Icarus. When I saw it, how remarkable he had made my vision. That's when I knew I'd never be legendary with him around. I was great, but he was greater. And so, his voice became a forced rasp. I needed to be the sun. Why tell me at all? I ask. Nate, it's been 40 years. You've seen from my art how I've struggled to avoid these encroaching shadows, with no way to unburden myself. But now I have you, and you finally have me. He ends the call. In my mind's eye, I see the last laugh, in which rainbow confetti erupts from the mouths of diners, laughing in the face of the figure of death who remains there, temporarily obscured. I see gutter folk, a mid-'80s depiction of nurses providing hands-on care to an AIDS patient. And it suddenly feels like performative empathy. I see the divine mess, a vivid celebration of celestial chaos, where noise drowns out the clarity of truth. I see Hercules in lace, in which the hero, draped in soft pink material, holds a club in one arm, slightly behind him, and which you may not notice given the baby cradled in the other. I see Sebastian, in which the saint looks bored of his tiresome, endless suffering. I see Icarus's terror when I find artwork I'm entranced by. I offer myself up for captivity. I look at it loudly, close up, and quietly from a distance. I look at it in and out of focus. And there, that's me, in the corner of that park scene, doing an impression of being incidental, the portrait of silence. Clara was 35 when she inherited the crumbling countryside estate of Château des Ombres, a legacy from a great aunt she barely remembered. The news arrived like an omen, slicing through the fog of her post-heartbreak haze, offering an escape from the echoes of a life she no longer wished to inhabit. The estate was a relic of another time, its walls cloaked in dust and draped with faded, peeling wallpapers. But amid the fading grandeur, one thing stood out: a painting in the dining room, unnervingly lifelike, depicting a woman in 17th century attire. A woman who looked eerily like Clara herself, dark eyes, too knowing. A face both foreign and familiar. She reached out without thinking, tracing her fingers over the delicate oil strokes. A chill seeped into her skin. She had never been the type to have doppelgangers or be mistaken for someone else. Yet, as she stared at the unsettling realism of the portrait, she wondered, was her face simply ordinary or disturbingly unique? At first, she dismissed the unease. She attributed the odd sensations, the dizziness, the light-headed drift she felt in the dining room, to exhaustion or stress. The house was ancient, creaking with history, and her rational mind clung to explanations. But as weeks passed, the feeling intensified. The air in that room thickened. Her unease grew stronger every time she walked by the portrait. The painting seemed to shift when she wasn't looking. A flicker in the eyes, a whisper of movement in the curls of painted hair. And at night, as she started hearing murmurs in the darkness, indecipherable and persistent, she began to fear that she was truly losing her mind. She sought answers, but the staff who had served her great-aunt Serafina knew little. The painting had always been there, an intrinsic part of the house. Frustrated, Clara turned to Serafina's belongings, rummaging through drawers and cupboards until she found an old, leather-bound notebook buried in a wooden chest. She flipped through brittle pages filled with lists and recipes until a single entry stopped her cold. She waits in the canvas. She watches. That night, a storm raged. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled through the halls. Sleep was impossible. The words from Serafina's notebook burned behind her eyes. Before she knew it, she was standing before the painting, breathless, pulse hammering. She reached out, fingers trembling, and scratched at the surface. The paint peeled away in thin layers, revealing another portrait beneath. The same elaborate clothing, the same pose, but the face was different. A stranger's. She could swear the figure in the painting smiled. Briefly. Impossibly. The grin was too wide, stretching just beyond the limits of the face. Too sudden, as if it had flickered into existence rather than emerged naturally. A grotesque mimicry of human expression. She blinked rapidly, her breath catching, as though clearing her vision might erase the horror. When she looked again, the smile was gone. A wave of nausea hit her. Staggering back, she felt a weakness grip her limbs. Panic drove her to action. At dawn, she reached out to an art historian she found online. Dr. Theodore Valds arrived at Château des Ombres 2 days later. He was a man of careful precision, his salt and pepper hair constantly pushed back, as if keeping stray thoughts in place. His initial response to her frantic message had been one of polite disinterest, until he saw the attached image. He recognized the woman at once. Isabella de Loria. By morning, he was at Château des Ombres, his presence sharp against the house's faded grandeur. "This is Alessandro di Rossi's work," he murmured, eyes narrowing in fascination. "An original. But this isn't possible." "What isn't possible?" Clara's voice was taut. He turned to her with a tense expression. Isabella was the only daughter of a powerful aristocratic family from southern Europe. She was painted by nearly all the great artists of her time. She was around 14 when she first posed for a portrait and vanished at age 22. No one knows exactly what happened to her, though there are many tales. But here, he continued, she looks older, much older. Clara led him to the torn fragments of the topmost layer, revealing the face that had been painted over. She looked a lot like me, she whispered, words feeling absurd even as she begged them. Her voice wavered, caught between disbelief and a creeping certainty she wished she could ignore. Dr. Valds exhaled sharply. The painting was altered, but why? And by whom? As they dug into history, the truth unfurled like a nightmare. The tale of Isabella's disappearance had long been attributed to a commoner's obsession. A man who had watched her from the shadows, consumed by an infatuation that festered into madness. When she refused his advances, he took her. She was hidden away, tortured, broken. Then she vanished. Her body was never found, Dr. Valse said, running a hand through his hair. But if this painting was done later, if Di Rossi painted her again, aged, changed, then... He hesitated. Then he must have known what became of her, Clara finished. Days of relentless research followed. They sifted through forgotten archives, scoured letters written in fading ink, and pieced together fragments of records long buried in the estate's library. Dr. Valtz reached out to colleagues, historians, and experts in restoration. It was in an obscure 17th century art treatise that they found mention of a certain Dai Rossi portrait. One never exhibited, one whispered about in hushed tones, rumored to hold something more than just pigment and canvas. There was never a commoner lurking in the shadows. The story had been a fabrication, a convenient myth. In truth, Dai Rossi had never been commissioned to paint Isabella. He had offered his services for free, captivated by the chance to immortalize such a remarkable face. An unusual gesture for an artist of his stature. His fascination began as artistic admiration, but soon it twisted into something else. He became obsessed, haunted by her beauty, unable to capture it to his satisfaction. When Isabella sat for him, the proximity consumed him. He had to be near her. He had to possess her. She was never seen again. Several years later, Isabella succumbed to the horrors she endured in De Rossi's grip. Unable to let her go, he took her blood and mixed it with his red paint, binding her essence to the canvas. He had painted her into permanence, attempting to capture what was left of her before it faded completely. The painting had fed on those who gazed too long, who felt its pull. A cycle of replacement, over and over. Clara felt the truth settle deep in her bones. Dr. Valtz turned to her, something dark flickering in his gaze. We must destroy it. They worked beneath the shroud of midnight, the flickering firelight casting restless shadows against the walls. The painting resisted, its surface trembling, as if something within fought desperately to hold on. Flames licked at the edges, hesitating, as if repelled. Then, with a sudden burst, the fire consumed the canvas, curling the centuries-old paint into ash. A wave of energy rippled through the room, dense, suffocating. And then, a scream, high, raw, inhuman, tore through the air, reverberating through the walls before fading into an eerie silence. Silence. A faint shimmer lingered in the air, barely perceptible, as if resisting the finality of destruction. For a fleeting moment, Clara thought she saw the embers pulse. Not with fire, but with something else she couldn't explain. The house exhaled. The weight pressing against Clara's chest lifted. When the last ember died, only ash remained. Leah and Dave arrived early at Chateau des Ombres, barely containing their excitement at finally purchasing their dream home. By the time the real estate agent arrived and began unlocking the heavy front doors, they had already taken in the surrounding land, giddy with possibility. They had heard about the disappearance of the previous owner, a woman named Clara. The house had been unoccupied since. Eagerly, they explored the dim hallways, the grand staircase, the candlelit chandeliers. Then, In the dining room, they stopped. There, above the fireplace, hung an old portrait. A woman in 17th century attire, hands folded neatly in her lap. Her eyes were dark and deep, her expression impossibly lifelike. Leah frowned, tilting her head. Something about the portrait unsettled her. Not fear, but familiarity, a strange tug in her gut, a whisper of recognition just beyond reach. That's strange. She looks a bit like... She stopped, heart hammering. How exquisite. The woman in the painting did look a lot like Leah, they both agreed, and for the briefest moment, she swore she saw the lips part, forming a sudden, unnatural smile. Behind them, the door clicked shut,